here. So I think, sleeve relatively it's a newer surgery. So I think in terms of long-term data, it's still being collected. So I just want to highlight the sleeve bypass study from the Netherlands, where they've done a RCT between gastric bypass and sleeve, 307 each arm, and this is the 5-year report. So at the end of the day, we do see weight loss that's a little bit more significant in the bypass group. I'm sorry, somehow my slide's not moving. There we go. In terms of at 1 year here, this is at 5 years here. And you can see that up to 33% or 1/3 of the patients need to have a conversion surgery in the sleeve patients due to weight regain. So just to say that at 1 year you see 28%, and then at 5-year follow-up this is 22%. But of course we know this is a cohort, right? This is a whole cohort of patients, and we have variable. Sorry, somehow my slides are not moving so well. But again, in terms of weight regain, you and I know it's a very sticky issue, right? How much is weight regain, and how many people gain in a percentage, and how much weight regain is considered weight regain. So it's all over the place. But by and large, most of our patients are going to gain some kind of weight 1 to 2 years post any kind of surgery, but the degree of which will vary. Half will lose about, maybe regain about 5% of the weight at 2 years. And as time moves on, which is sort of expected, we do gain more weight. In terms of sleeves, this is a systematic review, very heterogeneous weight regain rates, but you can see 20% at 2 years. And again, time moves on is about 76% at 6 years. Now, this heterogeneity in weight loss is not surprising. Now, this is a 1-year post-rural gastric bypass. You can see that, it's really all over the place, of course, with most patients losing about 50 to maybe 70% of excess weight loss. But you also have patients losing about 10 to 20% of excess weight loss, which is sort of called insufficient weight loss there. So this heterogeneity then, brings us to the topic of then why this weight regain happens. Now, I'll come back a little bit about the heterogeneity and the causes. But again, when we look about the why, it's multifactorial, right? Anatomical, which you guys are very familiar with. And actually, most of the time in most studies, it's actually patient-related, like biologic, nutritional, lifestyle factors, physical activity, and also psychological and psychosocial situations, including mental health issues, predispose people to weight regain through, poor lifestyle habits that either are still persistent after surgery or redevelop after surgery. And of course, we cannot run away from our genes. That predisposition also increases the weight regain factors. Now, again, I must stress that we are treating obesity. No matter what modality we use, the best drugs, the best kind of surgery, it is a chronic, unfortunately, relapsing disease with really multiple roots. And if we don't address these roots here, we're still going to be in a losing battle, right? And especially with the environment that we live in now. Now, these are some of the factors listed here. And in different patients, different dominance of factors, but all of them sometimes come into play, and including stigma. And if we don't address them, as what we see now after surgery, these will surface and cause the weight regain. So some of these, therefore, are highlighted here. For example, food urges, psychiatric conditions, especially anxiety and depression, tend to then make people go into maladaptive coping mechanisms with impulse and stress eating, and also that addictive behavior, right? We've already taken away the pleasure of eating or enjoyment of food, but the hedonism still needs to be satisfied. The dopamine is raging high, the lack of it actually. Then they may abuse drugs or alcohol, and even well-being and the lack of follow-up. I think you've discussed about follow-up. It does predispose one to weight regain. Now, the good factors would be strong post-op monitoring, that regular follow-up, and the ability to control food. And I don't think it's more than discipline, but it's about the factors that trigger patients to control or not control their food. And obviously increased physical activities, particularly resistance exercise. Now, in this systematic review, it's been found that things like, the anatomical factors like GJ stoma diameter of 25 millimeters or more, gastric volume rather than the remnant length, and other non-anatomical factors here, like anxiety, like I've talked about, and eating habits, sweets consumption, beverages in particular, emotional eating, binges, and that loss of control is very important here. Now, good factors or negative correlation, a good postprandial rise in GLP-1, that ability to adopt good physical activity habits, and of course, psychological factors are very important here. And in this LABS 2 study that followed up 2,000 patients at 3 years, they found that, adopting behaviors, and these are usually modifiable. Therefore, there are things that we can assist our patients to adopt and encourage them in our follow-up, right? Especially when, the effect of surgery sort of wanes off after 1 year. And these can be associated with clinically meaningful differences in weight loss and maintenance. For example, regularly monitoring one's weight, learning how to obey the cessation to stop when you feel full and stop grazing. And I think all of us face this frustration with our patients grazing. It's been found that if people do, stick to these habits, they are more likely to lose more weight and less likely to regain weight. 39% versus 24% in this LABS 2 cohort. In other studies, for example, even degree of metabolic adaptation after surgery, for example, people who have higher resting metabolic rate per kg lean mass compared to those who have lower, are 3 times more likely to be successfully losing the weight even at 3 years post-op. This is in Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. And in this it's an 8-year study by the Israeli group of 212 patients there, they found that things like, eating sweetened beverages, use of psychiatric medications, and hence psychiatric illnesses like depression, anxiety, and higher initial BMI or a lower weight are predictors for weight regain. I want to really stress on the slides because a lot of times it is the eating behaviors that actually do our patients in and do us in. For example, nibbling and grazing, right? Now we've restricted the volume of food that patient can eat in one sitting, but the patient has a loss of control. So they would eat that same amount throughout a long period of time. In fact, they don't practice mindful eating. We've had patients, for example, will sit in front of the computer or they put their food next to them and they just eat the same amount, they graze all day. So it's been found up to 47% of patients with weight regain will have kind of some form of grazing, and they're at risk of binge eating. People who graze pre-op, 94% of them continue to graze at 1 year post-op. People who are binge eaters, about half of them actually develop grazing 1 year post-op. And with that, it's a form of also disinhibition and addiction, and they also tend to turn to alcohol. Now, I like this paper and this slide because it talks about not just the behavior, but about the patterns, the details of the patterns, and what we can do for it. So this is for you, for your reference there. But at the end of the day, I think it goes beyond just that physical act of eating, right? Eating is a manifestation of how our body controls our energy, right? And it's very complicated. The gut, our adipose tissues, our nervous system, our brain, our environment, our upbringing, right? Our reward system and it influences reward system, all tells us what to eat. And we have this set weight, which is a bit of a complicated issue, but set weight again has a lot of influence. But once we move away from the set weight, our body doesn't like it, right? So it tries to adapt, it creates this metabolic adaptation by triggering or reducing or modifying the gut hormones that make us more hungry, less satiated, and satiated, drops our energy so that it can close the energy gap to make us gain weight, gain energy. But obviously, it's very complex. But bariatric surgery has been shown to be one of the most effective treatments, right, as you all know, to counteract some of these hormones. So let's concentrate on the right column, sleeve gastrectomy there. We do see rise in GLP-1 and PYY, drop in ghrelin levels, and leptin, and also modification of bile acids, all very favorable, which leads to reduced food intake. However, our counter-regulatory hormones, our body, is a very tough organism, right? Our counter-regulatory hormones can defend this energy deficit, but then, can be activated over time despite the surgery, so overcoming it. We also don't know how long this, favorable effect of bariatric surgery on these gut hormones would last, how long would it sustain for. There has been suggestion that higher ghrelin rise after sleeve is associated with weight regain, and the inability to sustain PYY also predisposes one to weight regain, as I will show you here. So in this very nice prospective study of 19 post-sleeve and 40 tri-root gastric bypass, we see that at the end of 52 weeks, good amount of weight loss in both types of surgery, with gastric bypass with more significant weight loss. But when you look at this nutrient stimulation, so they took a mixed meal test and they did gut hormones up to 120 minutes. Blue is at 26 weeks post-op. Red is 1 year post-op. You can see, just look at PYY. The amount of rise in PYY is not as good as in bypass, but you can see that after 1 year, that incremental rise or the effect of PYY tends to drop after 1 year, and the area under the curve is not as strong as in gastric bypass. Same for GLP-1, a very good rise, after 26 weeks, but that doesn't seem to be sustained at 1 year, whereas bypass, this is sustained. In terms of ghrelin levels, overall sleeve still does better, but what does it do to the person? We don't really know. I'll show you in the next slide. In other studies, it's been shown that, with sleeve dilatation the sleeve dilatation at 1 year, the gastric emptying slows, and perhaps that could influence some of this unsustained gut hormones that we see here. So in terms of appetite, how do they do? Hunger is improved or reduced at 6 months, but you see at 1 year, the hunger in sleeve goes back up, whereas it's sustained in a bypass. Now, I want to bring attention to cravings here. In terms of sweet cravings, bypass actually seems to do well. You see a much reduced and sustained reduction in sweet craving, and this has been shown in another study of comparing a band, and also perhaps the GLP-1 and PYY effects are modulating or augmenting these sweet cravings here. So we can see, in terms of gut hormones, they can modulate and influence the post-op weight regain. Now, all in, I think it's again to emphasize the point that, yes, we have all these biologics, but I think it is a very, very complex interplay, including environment and genes, right? What do genes do? I think genes go beyond one, DNA that has gone wrong or one chromosome that has gone wrong. The environment at which we were made, the intrauterine environment, is very, very important. And I cannot stress that enough, because that epigenetics then brings us to be susceptible to weight gain, to the triggers, to the environment triggers that we face in the rest of our lives. And also, polygenes are more important than single genes, and they've been shown to be more present in very high BMI, and therefore in our cohort of patients who present for surgery. Now, despite patients are still living in this milieu, which may not change. Now, actually, good news is epigenes do change after surgery, all right? But I think whether they're sustained or not, we don't know. But there's very good promising data. Epigenes change, and even the epigenes that's passed on to the next generation has modified with bariatric surgery. So that's very good news. Now, in terms of this is a very good paper. It's very complicated, but I encourage you to read by Barbara Crockey and team. Just really talks about, the interaction of our modern lifestyle. And actually, we have a lot of obesogens in what we eat and our pesticides. And, our epigenes then across our lifespan predisposes to this interaction, right, of how we eat, right? That actually influences a lot how we eat, how we metabolize, how we interact with our nutrients, and that ultimately leads to our weight gain. And all these are often not addressed in the therapies that we give. So I think at the end of the day, well, again, back to the drawing board, that knowing all this, actually knowing our patients by following them up is very crucial. So the moment they flick up their weight, we know that they've, gained weight and intervene early, right? Be a detective. We need to be a detective, find out what has gone wrong, and if needs be, go into further evaluation or even imaging. And I think I want to highlight pharmacotherapy. I find that as physicians, we really drag out too long. We have such much inertia. Time to intervene with pharmacotherapy in our trials are 36 to 72 months, at which time our patients have developed a new set point, new habits that are again very hard to change. Now, again, I showed you earlier that with time, especially with sleep, GLP-1 and gut hormones effect wane. We have very good promising drugs, and this has been studied retrospectively, semaglutide or Wegovy 2.4 in patients with very high BMI. Comparing them with people who have not gone through surgery, here 72% have gone through sleeve in this 39 patients. You can see a good 10% weight loss at 24 weeks, and incremental weight loss is very good, just like people who have not gone through surgery, no difference. And also just to let you know that in these gut hormone treatments, the weight loss can still be seen all the way up to 1 year. So this 10% weight loss is just sort of the tip of the iceberg. In another study, again, retrospective, this looks at tirzepatide as well, which is a dual GIP agonist. Again, very well tolerated. We see 15.5% weight loss at 6 months. Again, the weight loss will continue if you continue the drug here. You can see that up to about 60% of the patients on tirzepatide can lose more than 15% of the weight. So before we actually consider revision surgery, if there's no anatomical reasons, we now, can consider matching up GLP-1 because I think that's one of the defects that we have. Sorry, I'm going to go over time, but please allow me to share these two studies because I think they're very important strategies that we can use for patients who undergo sleep. So for example, with this Jamie Art study, BMI more than 50, he put patients, only 25 though, but he put these patients on topiramate and phentermine combination for 3 months and continued them on for 2 years after sleep. And it's been shown that compared to sleep alone, you can see a very good drop in weight. Now, mind you, they started with a BMI of 61, BMI now of 52 after surgery, quite a more BMI, greater BMI drop than people with sleep alone. I mean, quite comparable there. In another similar study, same drug, these patients again are continue on, and again, they are more likely to hit a BMI less than 40 when they are continue on the drug. So again, it's a synergistic combination of drug because these patients do start with a very, very high BMI. So in short, I think instead of layering on, we should just tackle the problem all in. Medical, our allied health, very important, our psychologist, our dietitian, along with our surgical colleagues. So in order for me to answer this, I think I need to say that, it is really multifactorial. We have really the environment working against us. I live in Asia where there's food everywhere, every corner, every time of the day. And also our poor patients have to live in this environment on the top of their biologics and also the stigma that they live with. And a healthcare team like ourselves, who sometimes are biased against the patients, we don't do enough digging, we don't understand the disease well enough. So I think the solutions would be, to know our patients, to know our disease, and to know our treatment. So again, action, time for action. This is our IFSO IH webinar that's coming up next week. I encourage you and your allied health team to join. You can sign up at the IFSO website. Again, it really talks about problematic eating post-op, as I've talked about. As a review, I thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for the 2 minutes over time there.